Well, I have been coming to Montreat since I was 3 years old. And my family had a house up on Kentucky Road, and I spent a good part of the summer here every year. And in the summer of 1965, my husband was pastor of a church in Greenville, South Carolina. And we were up here on vacation. And so I'm a longtime Montreater. Montreat was, in some ways, an interesting mixture of conservative and forward-looking. And the local community was more conservative, but the boards and agencies that sponsored the conferences brought in creative and interesting people. And it was the council, not sure whether it was the Council on Christian Action or Church and Society, it had two different names, that brought Martin Luther King. And of course, you wouldn't miss such a thing if you cared about those kind of issues, which I did. It created an uproar in not just Montreat, but Black Mountain and surrounding areas. And there were rumors flying fast and heavy that people were going to bring guns and come in. And they stopped every car at the gate and searched it for guns or other things that might cause trouble. So there was a lot of security, and of course in the auditorium there was a lot of security. Matter of fact, I believe there was a policeman standing on the stage the entire time. So the air was tense when King came, and tense for two reasons. One was this rumors of violence that were going around, and the other was back in 1965, Martin Luther King was a controversial but important leader, and so people had strong feelings on both sides, and you could feel it in the room. But it was interesting, when he finished speaking, there was just a moment of dead silence, and it was sort of like people were taking it all in and couldn't decide whether they were going to applaud or not if they hadn't been supportive of King. And then applause broke out and he got a standing ovation. And I took that to be a very positive sign that his message had come across, and that even people who had not been his supporters when they came in had been moved by this address. And many of us thought he was, of course, a man sent from God, but that he came for this special time, because we could have had riots across the South, and of course we had disturbances, but Martin Luther King's leadership, which you saw that day in the speech and in multiple other things, made a difference in the way the issues of race were finally addressed in the South. I think it was a pivotal moment for Montreat, and it was certainly an important moment for the church. The General Assembly of the church had been forward-looking for a number of years, and in fact, after the Supreme Court decision, the General Assembly met right afterwards and voted an action in support of the Supreme Court decision, which was very controversial across the church and local churches. But the leadership of the church was forward-looking, and I think King, more than the expression of the change, was a culmination of leadership that had been nurturing an address to racism over the decade before. A behind-the-scenes group that was the group that sponsored Martin Luther King was, of course, not a big committee or council of the church, and people know who they were, but they were controversial too. But I think their leadership in bringing Martin Luther King to Montreat was a very important public step, and just illustrates the kind of work they did, much of it not so well known as this event, that helped the church move forward. So I think I want to pay tribute to those church leaders who were part of that council and supported it and helped make the Martin Luther King event happen.